This week in the enterprise security news, the bad neighbor vulnerability. FireEye announced Mandiant Advantage. Aqua's Trivy now available as a GitHub action. Datadog adds deployment tracking to its APM to prevent outages. And Tenable and the Center for Internet Security enter a partnership. In our second segment, we welcome Whitney Maxwell, security consultant at Rapid7, for an interview on phishing and vishing. In our final segment, we wrap up with two pre-recorded micro-interviews from Security Weekly's Virtual Hacker Summer Camp with Liam Downward, the CEO of Cyrisma, and Matthew Gardner, the principal security strategist at Mimecast. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Cybercriminals are opportunistically targeting industries that continue to operate full tilt during the coronavirus shutdowns, and their attacks have grown more sophisticated. Given this shifting landscape, taking the appropriate countermeasures becomes paramount. Mimecast Email Security 3.0 helps you evolve from a perimeter-based security strategy to one that is comprehensive and pervasive with cyber resiliency in mind. From the company that stops at nothing to block cyber threats, Mimecast is offering a fully featured 90-day web security service. Visit securityweekly.com/Mimecast to learn more. Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome to episode 202 of Enterprise Security Weekly for October 14th, 2020. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Mr. John Strand. John, welcome.
Happy to be back. Sorry I wasn't here last week. I was wrapped up in the middle of working an incident, so it was kind of critical. So I'm very, very happy to be back and not doing that right now.
Good learning experience, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what I need at my age. Learning experience.
Learning experience, right? Mr. Matt Alderman is here with us. Matt, welcome.
John, I'm always in an incident. It's called integration.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Making good progress, though. If you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows, submit your guest suggestions by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete the form, and every once in a while, when we feel like it, maybe we try and review them as often as possible, but usually it's every once in a while. Also, it is official. Security Weekly, in partnership with the Cyber Risk Alliance, is excited to present Security Weekly Unlocked on December 10th, 2020. The inaugural edition of Security Weekly Unlocked also celebrates Security Weekly's 15-year anniversary. Registration and call for speakers is still open. However, it closes very soon. The deadline for the CFP is October 15th, which is this Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. That is tomorrow. It is, in fact, tomorrow. So get your submissions in. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked for your last-minute CFP entries and to register for the conference.
John, you got to get your CFPs in.
I know. Can you just put me in and say John's going to talk about something?
Yes. Yeah. We can do that.
Just book me.
Just give us a topic, would you, so we can align.
Cyber deception.
Cybersecurity.
Dude, I'm sticking on cyber deception and MITRE Shield and active defense. That's my thing.
Okay.
I'm riding that all the way through.
Outstanding. I wish we had some news on that. The news is kind of light this week, though.
We do, actually. There is some cool stuff on it.
Can I go off on a riff?
Yeah, there's
first?
A couple of stories that tie to it.
Can I go on a riff?
Yes.
You know why news is light? Because Allard just messed up all kinds of stuff.
Did it?
So they changed their pricing stuff. This went into effect like late last week, early this week.
Who's this?
I was following hundreds of companies for free under the old plan. They decided to move to a paid plan. Now they want to charge me $420 a year to follow those exact same companies. So yeah. I'm a little perturbed.
Yeah, Allard does that, though. I mean, they've flipped back and forth. A lot of them have flipped back and forth between paid and not paid, similar services like that. So yeah. I think talking about security products, right? If you make something free, and in whatever capacity and however you want to interpret free, make sure it stays free, because when you have to back off of that, it makes people really mad, right? We'd say that all the time with any kind of product or service, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly.
And they just gave me a really good business idea.
Yes.
Do things for free and then charge for them? That's
No.
That's the exact opposite of what
new
Paul just said.
competitive service. No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. Oh, I like that. Even better.
Yes. How are we feeling about this bad neighbor vulnerability? I wanted to cover it quick because it is light kind of news week. It sounds like more of a. You got a video switcher now, John. I'm impressed.
I do have a video switcher.
Fancy.
Because I can make my screen big, or I can make me little.
Right.
Look at that. All right. So the best write-up I've seen on this so far is actually from McAfee.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. Yeah.
The reason why I love what McAfee did, and Paul, one of the reasons you're going to love it, anytime there's a vulnerability and they actually quote the RFC in the article, my heart glows. Right. So this particular vulnerability had a score of, I think, 9.8, which is almost at the very tippy top of the scale, which pretty much means Microsoft believes that it is, in fact, wormable, that this is actually something that will lead to remote code execution. As it stands right now, it's blue screen of death.
Yeah, Rapid7 was kind of, in their write-up, they were kind of alluding to that, like, it's a lot of work to go from blue screen of death to full remote code execution and may require some other vulnerabilities, which kind of puts me on the fence about the 9.8.
It does, but I think the reason why it's 9.8 is I think that Microsoft actually did share that this is remote code execution. I think Microsoft has that proof that they can, in fact, do it. And you also know it's just a matter of time. There's a kid in Sweden right now who's sitting and working on this, and he's trying to come through. Maybe Steven Sims is working on writing up an exploit for it. But there was a lot of information, a lot of proof of concept code. And it's interesting because it's kind of similar to the ping of death in the fact that the sizes are incorrect. If you remember a ping of death, you could make the packet size larger, and it would basically DOS the system. This basically is you set the length to an odd number, and it basically overstates the buffer by 8 bytes, and that basically gives you the capability to actually write to arbitrary memory. So right now it's just blue screen of death. There's probably going to have to be a memory read vulnerability to couple it, possibly a format string, but it's absolutely something we need to get patched in our environments as quickly as possible. Don't be one of those organizations that says, hey, there's no public exploit for this yet. We don't have to worry about it. Start right now.
Yeah,
and let's get this patched.
Sound advice.
And also,
how do you feel about the workaround, John?
The workaround is crazy. Shut down IPv6. That's nuts.
It looked like there was another PowerShell, but there was another PowerShell in there. Does it just turn off the particular feature that exposes this vulnerability, I should say?
The actual workaround that I saw, if you actually look at the code, it's NetSH. Here, I can actually share out my screen because I have that. Right here is the Rapid7 blog, which basically is disabling the DNS part of IPv6. So it's basically disabling that recursive DNS lookup that it comes in on IPv6 and then causes the crash to occur. So it's just disabling that. But I've also seen a number of blogs that basically say point blank, just disable IPv6. I don't recommend doing that.
Yeah,
there's a number of different Windows services like Exchange and Outlook that'll actually come back to the IPv6 loopback address, and you may crash those services. So do be very careful.
Interesting. So this is one you got to patch, basically.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And my machine is ready to be patched right after this show. I just didn't want to do it beforehand because I have no idea how long it's going to take.
I'm ready to be patched. Patch me now, Microsoft.
It's like I have my Windows machine is like, I have an update. I'm like, no. I'm about to do a show. Don't you know that?
Don't do that now. Don't do that now.
Right after the show. Discussion. We'll get to patching.
Right after the show. So, Paul, I wanted to go back to an article we did last week. ZeroFox bought Cyvalence from Looking Glass Cyber, and I asked the question, what's the future of Looking Glass Cyber then, right? Is the company done? What's going on? So right after the show, an article comes out, Looking Glass broadens executive team, set in vision for next generation cybersecurity products. So it looks like they're going to pivot a bit. They brought in a bunch of new executives. They sold the Cyvalence component to ZeroFox, but it looks like they're going to stay in the situational awareness platform space. So I'm unsure why they sold Cyvalence, the threat intel feeds, because... So anyways, John has some insight on this too.
A couple of different things. One of the reasons why I've always liked Looking Glass is they incorporate that active cyber defense into their platform. where they can actually go through, identify different attacks. They can actually disrupt the adversaries. They can do a number of those different things, which I think is cool, especially whenever that's coupled with threat intelligence. So, Matt, here's my thought on this, because I got to thinking about it and pondering it. My thought is there's so many threat intelligence feeds out there. Why spend a whole bunch of time and money trying to develop yet another threat intelligence feed when you can pivot, incorporate that data, use that data effectively, and then make yourself intelligence feed agnostic? So instead of spending all of this money on trying to do something that everyone else is doing and probably doing better than you are, focus on your core competency and integrate with those feeds. That's what I'm trying to piece together. And right now, with the active defense and that, I think that's what they're thinking right now, is why do something when it's a losing game? Whenever you have so many people doing it with so much more data, you gotta pivot to something else. And I think they're planning on actually pulling multiple feeds in and doing their threat intelligence actions on this side with it. What do you think? That's my theory.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like, right? Is that if you're going to be a broad-based situational awareness platform, you're going to need threat feeds from various places. So why have your own threat feed, sell it to ZeroFox, make some money, maybe leverage that cash as part of this pivot or as part of the pivot and continue to move. But it was interesting that they brought in a new executive team at the same time, which means that new executive team was already coming in, right? Probably decided, hey, let's spin this thing out. Let's kind of refocus over here and go. And so this has kind of tied my last week's thoughts back together to say, oh, okay, so Looking Glass still is a valid company, just a change in direction.
And we don't often see that this particular situation, right? It's kind of a unique set of events.
And I think it's a unique set of events because let's think about the normal trajectory of companies. It's very rare for them to say, we're not good at this, let's jettison it and focus on our core competency. Instead, they constantly tried to add more features on. So I don't know if at the end of the day, this is a good play to kind of jettison something and focus on what they're actually doing and doing really, really well. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but at least it's refreshing. I mean, I'm tired of organizations that keep buying and adding additional components and they become this Franken company of a bunch of components that don't meld well together at all.
It's a good point.
You might know a few of those.
Yeah, there's some of that. Some of that in the market today for sure.
Yeah, my favorite, since we're not afraid to name names, you remember a couple of years ago at Cisco, at RSA, they had these Cisco ads, and it showed an airplane that was like hobbled together from a bunch of pieces from a bunch of other airplanes. And they're basically like, you wouldn't fly an airplane made up of a bunch of different types of airplanes. You should unify your security under Cisco. But that airplane perfectly encapsulated the way Cisco's portfolio is. It's a whole bunch of technologies all hodgepodge together.
Absolutely. Matt, on an unrelated note, I don't want to associate this next story with our current conversation, but FireEye announced the Mandiant Advantage threat intelligence SaaS-based offering.
Yes. I added this one in there. I saw it. There's one line in here that I think, kind of summarizes this. You got to read these articles and kind of find where the meat is. Threat intelligence delivers immediate value by making it easy to understand, prioritize, and act upon the emerging insights from Mandiant Frontline. So what they're doing is taking the information they're getting from other aspects, tying it into some of their threat intelligence, making it available as a SaaS offering. The question is, John, does this provide a lot of value to organizations? Maybe if you're a FireEye customer, it does.
Here's the deal. FireEye should be doing this already. I mean, that's literally their freaking job, is watching for threats, and analyzing traffic, analyzing data that's going between your systems, analyzing threat actor techniques and detecting it. This, I hate to say this, I could be wrong. Once again, this seems like a vendor that has a product that already has all of this in it, but then they're reselling basically what they should be doing already. Honestly, FireEye should be going through and detecting threats in your organization, but to actually spool up a separate SaaS offering in addition to that seems like they're double dipping to me.
Maybe they're trying to sell that intelligence to somebody that's not a FireEye customer.
Okay, that's just weird. I mean, maybe. I guess. I don't know.
Atos is in the news twice.
Twice?
Twice.
Well, because they bought 2 other MSSPs to continue their expansion. I mean,
pretty much what it boils down to, right?
Yeah.
With different focus from the MSSPs they bought, right?
Yeah, different markets, right? One was French Benelux, which was the digital.security one.
Yep, that sounded like more of an IoT play as well. There's a lot of IoT. If you convert the website from French to English, right, then you get the it's a IoT kind of based MSSP, which is strange but unique.
Yeah, and then Palladian was another US-based one. So really, I mean, what it boils down to is they're the number 1 MSSP in Europe, number 3 in the world. They just acquired another property in Europe that makes them bigger. And they also bought a property in the US, which continues to move them up. They want to be one of the biggest MSSPs in the world. That's where they're going. And they're just buying properties.
And let's hope they do a great job. I mean, that's my ask about MSSPs, right? MSPs, however you want to. Is there a difference, MSSP and MSP? Do we differentiate between the two?
The big differentiation isn't MSSP or MSP. It's basically MSSP and MDR. I think, and that's ultimately where I see Atos going, is into that more MDR space. And the reason why, once again, if you're doing MSSP, you're pulling all kinds of different logs and stuff in. And it seems like MDR is basically, let's look at the EDR space. Let's look at the endpoint space. Let's actually pull the logs that are relevant to an incident and attacks. Let's analyze those instead of trying to look at absolutely everything. And that's ultimately where I see them going. And they should be. I think that's where any MSSP or MSP should be. They should be actually going to this full MDR space instead.
And can they really be effective for organizations? I know there's a lot of belly aching and complaining about MSSPs. But they can be effective. If it's managed, it's kind of like threat intelligence as well. Like you have to manage it effectively in your organization, set expectations, understand what they do well, understand what you do well, and integrate that into your process.
Well, and let's talk about a company that helps other companies do this well, SOC Prime. If you look at what SOC Prime does, is everybody's using Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana all over the place.
Yep.
They're basically working with companies to actually set up the different types of alerts, the different types of rules, and the filtering is probably the most important thing. Having a firm understanding of how you detect an attack, what types of logging and alerting is built around that, and then basically getting rid of all the rest of the noise. So whenever you're looking at MDRs, they're doing that, right? So we're finally starting to see MDRs get better at detecting attacks. And many times under the hood, they're going to have a CrowdStrike, they're going to have a Sentinel-1, they're going to have some type of really nice EDR underneath the hood, coupled with some network threat analytics. That's what Gartner has talked about. You have to have both. So it's getting to the point where people have finally realized what it takes to detect attacks. And we're seeing these companies start to make that move to look at logs and analysis properly.
I think this is an exciting thing for the industry, right? Because I think we started with, let's collect all the logs and then sort it out later. And then I feel like we moved to really point solutions where we could collect telemetry from an EDR perspective. We could collect some network traffic. We could do the user entity behavior analytics was a feature. I feel like we went from collect everything to a bunch of point solutions kind of with their specialties to today where we term it MDR, where we're like, you're going to not log everything. You're going to log very strategically, and we're very strategically going to tie those things together to do basically everything that all those kind of point solutions did that were really just features.
And what I think caused that to happen, I think the big driver for that is you had Splunk, you had ArcSight, you had the big SIEMs, right? And they were basically log everything because we make more money. And then people started looking at how expensive it was to get like a Splunk license, and then you have Elk stand up. And with Elk, you can use a free license with Elastic, and you can start doing better. And then all of a sudden, because it became kind of this kind of democratic process, there was a bunch of people in the industry that said, why are we logging everything? I only have signatures written for these specific types of things. Let's ingest that. And then you couple that with Sysmon showing up from Microsoft Windows. Now we have logs that matter. That is what ultimately caused this entire game to crack wide open and actually start moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I think, but there's a couple other interesting points. It's not just about management anymore. Detection is okay, but it's the response piece, right? It's making that stuff actionable. And I think the challenge with the MSSP market was they weren't doing much on the response side and the actionability. It kind of emerged into the MDR space where people are focusing more on detection and response. To your point, yes, maybe taking less data and being more strategic about it, but it's that actionability, I think, that was really causing the MSSP's grief.
I disagree. I agree and I disagree. I agree on the long run. I disagree on the short term. And the reason why I disagree on the short term is even with MDR, it's incredibly rare for an organization to hand over the ability to respond to an incident completely to a third party. The perceived risk is still too high. If they see an alert and then your MDR comes in and shuts that system down, Paul and I, we joke about this stuff all the time. Whenever IPS first came out, it would shut down entire network segments. People would just shut that crap off. So I don't believe that it caused the evolution to where we are now. But I do believe whenever you're looking at a lot of these different types of detections, especially in the EDR space, and how they're getting better, they're tying it into MITRE, and they're basically saying things like, if you see CertUtil making a connection out to the open internet to Kazakhstan, let's just nuke that system. Let's shut that system down. Our threshold for understanding attacks is much higher now than it was even 5 years ago. So I believe that statement will be correct over the next 5 years as organizations get more comfortable handing the keys over to a third party to actively react to those incidents.
But I mean, the vuln management space went through aspects of this as well. And what I think it boils down to is some level of prioritization. What should the organization look at from a response perspective instead of just blasting alerts all over the place? That wasn't helping anybody either, John.
You're absolutely right. But also that prioritization, whenever we're talking about the alerts, the fact that the alerts were blasting all over the place goes back to the white noise problem, where your SIEM was constantly throwing all kinds of different alerts. You were logging absolutely everything. It was ponderous and slow to do any queries. So whenever you're talking about the number of alerts that were coming out of it, a lot of that came from the problem of having too much data and data that didn't mean anything. Now we're starting to see that coupling with MITRE, and I think MITRE showed up in the Looking Glass. One of their new executives, Mary, I think was from MITRE. But you're seeing what MITRE is doing, and now we're developing a much better understanding of what attack paths really look like. Like, we're not going to sit and look at process tracking and CFMORs and all of these different things. We know now what certain types of tactics that attackers use look like, and they reuse them. So our confidence and understanding in the attacks has started going back up much higher. So that means our alerts are more refined. We're not getting as much white noise as we used to. And I know somewhere there's an analyst that's listening to this and they're like, I still have tons of false positives I'm dealing with. Go back 15 to 18 years ago. Yeah. That's when it really sucked.
But I think two things really changed to lead us to this point.
Yeah.
On your last statement, John, is that one, we were really good at looking at network traffic, and that's quite frankly where a lot of the attacks were. Attacks today, they involve processes on the system, logs on the system, networks, all kinds of different things, right? And it's taken time to be able to pull all those data points together. I do think what has helped is machine learning, right? I don't go so far to say AI.
You're
there is an aspect
broad
of that
category of algorithms, right?
Yeah.
Like these tons. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
The application of a broad machine learning algorithms to this problem. But also, I mean, that's just part of it, right? The other part of it is we had a lot more stuff for machine learning to look at and correlate. Whereas, back in the day, we could, like your IPS example, look at attacks that are coming across the network. Now the network is just one kind of touch point, right? There's a lot more different data points from various different systems, threat intelligence feeds, all that kind of feeds in, making the machine learning, I think, much more applicable. And it also took time for those algorithms to be less of a buzzword and actually be helpful to the analyst and not just trying to make decisions on their behalf without the appropriate algorithm for the appropriate problem and data set, right?
And let's use some examples, right? Whenever we're talking about machine learning, I don't think it's going to be machine learning like learning your network, because that's crap. But what most of the machine learning is being done is whenever you're an EDR, like a Cylance or a CrowdStrike or Microsoft to the main extent, they're collecting so much process information on how things actually work on a computer that it's far easier now for them. Like I use the CertUtil example. If you're looking for like LOL bins or LOL BAS, if you want to Google it, if you're looking at all these different executables on a Windows system, 99.9999999% of the time, it'll never make a network connection out to the internet. If it does, we've now identified that anomaly. So once again, we're focusing on the right things. We're now getting the right data. And when you feed the right data in, those algorithms are so much better. So I agree with you 100% on that.
You guys should see the Discord channel right now. It's hilarious.
I'm going to try.
It completely just solidified this conversation for us. So
that's good.
Good job, guys.
Quick note, Aqua's Trivy is now available as a GitHub action. It is, in fact, a vulnerability scanner for, it looks largely Docker container images. From what I gleaned from its website.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's now a GitHub action. I think you've got a lot of choices for how you want to glean vulnerabilities from your images. You should be doing that in some capacity. There's really no excuse because there's so many great open source and commercial products for doing that.
Oh, yeah. Just watch Application Security Weekly. You'll see them all the time.
Right.
I have trouble keeping up with that. I feel my age whenever I'm looking at like Application Security Weekly and containers, and it's just, there's so much more now to learn than there was a long time ago.
I think a great study, though, John, and to your point, and Matt, right, is looking at like what's most effective. Because I mean, we've counted vulnerabilities before, right? And there's so many different ways that in different products that will look at your container image and determine their vulnerabilities there. What's the real difference between them? Is there huge differences between the open source ones and commercial ones? Collectively or by themselves? I know commercial ones, we have talked about the transient vulnerabilities. They go much deeper, and that's certainly one of the big differentiators.
But that's that 80-20 rule. And you know, people cringe whenever we talk about it, but it's true. Whenever you're looking at the open source tools, you can get about 80%. More importantly, you're going to hit those things that your general script kiddies are going to go after.
Yep.
When you're paying for something, that's where you're actually going to be targeting that, and that's why that threat modeling matters. If you're worried about script kiddies, the open source stuff is probably going to work for you.
Probably fine.
If you're worried about nation states, you're probably going to want a commercial product to dig deep.
Yep. Tenable was in the news, and they made a partnership with the Center for Internet Security to bolster cyber hygiene based on a CIS standard.
Yeah, well, the CIS standards have existed for a while. I mean, when I built policy compliance at Qualys, CIS benchmarks were...
You've been there for a long time, yeah.
Right, they've been there a long time. What CIS did is they added implementation guidance in different levels of implementation guidance to help prioritize those configuration checks in the benchmarks. What Tenable did is partnered with CIS to include that implementation guidance into Security Center, Tenable.sc. I don't see this for Tenable.io, at least it wasn't not mentioned. It looks like some of the capabilities that Security Center has, and those people who work for Tenable knows the difference between what SC had versus what IO had. Therefore, I think they're taking some of that additional data that Security Center has to make these prioritizations and highlight them in a new scorecard or report or something like that. But that's what it boiled down to.
Sweet. Datadog was really application performance monitoring, not so much a security thing.
Yeah, but you know, it's interesting, right? I've talked about this a little bit, maybe more on Application Security Weekly than here. But there's this interesting, Datadog's interesting because they were primarily more application performance management that moved into the security space.
Oh, is it performance management or monitoring? Or is that interchangeable?
They're pretty interchangeable.
Gotcha.
But what's interesting here is that the application performance vendors that also do security have some very interesting insight. Because look, if a bad release goes out and drops your application and it doesn't perform, it fails, it crashes, what's the difference of that of somebody doing a DDoS attack to take down your app, right? There's just this interesting relationship. And what I like that Datadog has done is really balance the performance side and the security side in their offerings.
And here's something that I think is that a lot of people lose sight of. Whenever you're looking at something like Datadog and when they're doing APM, they're not just talking about like input and output, but they actually can look at the different components within the quote unquote black box to see how they're performing. And the reason why I think that that's critical is most of the companies that try to jump into cloud and application security, they have a very, very like limited view of what it is, and they have limited backgrounds on the complexity of what they're testing. And what I mean is they'll look at what types of news stories for application attacks, and then they'll set up some detects for that. Whenever you're looking at Datadog, they know more about how a lot of these different applications function. than the security companies do. So I always have this adage, it's easier for me to teach a developer security than it is for me to take somebody in security and teach them development. And I like this movement where you're having companies that have a much better understanding of the intricacies of applications and the performance monitoring within the components of applications starting to get into security, because I think that their depth is going to be better because they understand the applications better than a lot of companies that are just trying to slap a security seal on top of like application or cloud data management.
Agreed, John. So I'm waiting for New Relic and App Dynamics to get their act together and jump in.
Just a couple of funding, I think both funding announcements. Onapsis raised $55 million and Elusive Networks raised $24 million. Oh,
hats off to Elusive. We love you guys. Anybody that does cyber deception, we love you.
It's John Shtick. Onapsis is cool too. We have good friends there as well.
Oh, Onapsis, because we have friends that work there. So.
Well, and SAP security is an issue that we don't often talk about, right? In the general cybersecurity terms, that I think we should be talking more about it.
But this is more, right? I mean, they were SAP, then they moved on to Oracle. Now they're going after some of the other big SaaS platforms. Because remember, Workforce or Salesforce and Workday, and there's a lot of other platforms evolving that are not just your SAP and Oracles of the day, right? And so this funding is going to allow them to move into some of those other areas, which are platforms that need to be protected too.
Well, and they're horribly neglected platforms. Like when we're testing, like they're just god awful. And I think one of the big problems with many of those SaaS platforms is the legacy component, right? A lot of those platforms have been in existence for a long time, and they keep hobbling new technologies on top of it. So you do need something like an Onapsis to come in and kind of clean out the skeletons in your closet. So no, it's absolutely one of those areas. And also hats off to them, because I think honestly, whenever we saw Selena and some of the people go over there, it was like, is this actually going to be a good move in the long run? But damn, if they didn't make it work. And they made it work because they kick ass at what they do.
There was a SQL-like programming language that's used in SAP applications that the name escapes me, but there's like millions and millions of lines of code that exist today, and I had never heard of the language. It's like, talk about a problem that's not being addressed. That was one data point that stuck out to me. I was like, wow.
So, and then on the Elusive side, one of the common complaints that I have on this show is people talk about vendors and they get all this money, and I just don't see them ever in security assessments ever. And I mean, we have a fairly good sampling of the industry as a whole. And I will say that I was talking with Matt about this while you were getting your headset on. We are now starting to see cyber deception technologies show up a lot in our pen tests. And Elusive is just one of the vendors that is out there. And so trust me, this crap works. If you're an adversary trying to break in and you spend like half a day trying to pop a honeypot or spending all day scanning a honey net, that matters. And I just want to see more people like Canary just continuing to grow and make this something that's normal in the industry, not an add-on.
Agreed. Well, that will conclude the news for today. Stay tuned. Interview with Whitney coming up next.